Secret, Australia is experiencing a downturn in the property market. But if you own your own home or have a mortgage, there's worse news. Many believe calling it a downturn is foolishly optimistic. The slump we're currently in is more like falling off a cliff. Real estate and finance experts you're about to meet predict the value of your house could slide by as much as 40% in the next year. Yes, 2/5 of your home's worth wiped out in just 12 months. It's coming. And it's not if, but when. The end of Australia's property boom time. Party's over.
It's definitely over, and it's going to be over for quite some time.
Tonight, experts across the industry, the market analyst, the estate agent, the investor, the data scientist, and the liquidator deliver their sobering verdicts. Get out while you can.
Get out while you can. Absolutely.
At the worst end of the spectrum, if everything turned against us, we could see property prices 40 to 45% down from their peaks, which is a huge deal.
Who loses out big in the next couple of years?
Everyone.
Home ownership is our national obsession. But are we finally waking up from the great Australian dream? For some, it's become a debt-trap existence with no way out.
One we've got on the market now, we've had on the market for 18 months and still not sold. You know, it's something which you think about all day.
For as long as most of us care to remember, or perhaps only as long as we want to remember, property prices in Australia have only gone in one direction, at least in our big cities. Data scientist Martin North of Digital Finance Analytics says the problem is blindingly obvious. Australia is addicted to debt.
Because as a society and as a government and as a regulatory system, we're all banking on the home price engine. It just goes on giving and giving and giving, right? But it's not going to. We've got a debt bomb, we've got a debt crisis, and at some point it's going to explode in our face.
Well, the developers are desperate for buyers.
Desperate for buyers at the moment.
Major real estate companies refused our requests to interview their agents on the housing front line.
Your town?
But brave agent Peter Unan is defying his industry colleagues to speak the truth. The market is down and still a long way from the bottom.
Did you guys used to always sit in the office thinking, all right, the good times are going to end soon?
100%. 100%. Doesn't last forever.
In his patch of Sydney's west, house prices are plunging.
What would be the median price in an area like this?
You're looking at about $1 million.
And what would it have been a year ago?
About 1.2.
So they've lost $200,000 in the space of a year.
Yeah.
Our big mistake? Believing that house prices would keep going up and up forever. Were we all in fantasy land there for a while?
The market was clearly overvalued. There's no doubt about that. On our numbers, Sydney was effectively over 40% overvalued, and Melbourne was overvalued by about the same amount.
I've got the view that there were so many people all on the same drug, right? The banks, the Reserve Bank, and individuals, and everyone was expecting and hoping that prices would always go up.
As house prices drop, banks claim they're working with homeowners in distress. Truth is, for many, it's payback time. In Melbourne, an illness has Mohammed Sueid on the mortgage ropes. He knows that knockout blow is coming.
We haven't had any holidays at all living in house for the last 4 years. We didn't have a good car for the last 4 years. Yeah, you can't enjoy the life you're supposed to enjoy at your own house.
Those like Mohammed, who bought at the market peak, now face being trapped in a mortgage prison. So a lot of people start out trying to buy this straight off the bat. That's not the way to go.
And that's a mistake. You put a dirty great noose around your neck and you can't do anything.
Adelaide property investor Bushy Martin blames us for any coming crisis. Australians who mortgaged themselves up to their eyeballs, buying their dream house before they could actually afford it.
We expect to have everything now. And I blame the iPhone for it. That's the iPhone
I own everything now routine that we've all become used to.
People just scroll Instagram and go, "Oh, I should be living like that."
That's me. I want to be them. Absolutely right.
But it can go belly up very quickly.
Very quickly. Absolutely very quickly. If you're getting into those sorts of areas at the very peak of the market and having to live a very basic lifestyle just to cover the mortgage, there don't need to be too many changes in anything to tip that over the edge.
Bank data shows that nearly a half of all homeowners trying to refinance their mortgages are being knocked back. Compare that to only 5% a year ago. And now some banks are doing what many prayed would never happen, making the mortgage pain even worse by raising interest rates. Data scientist Martin North.
A lot of people bought in relatively recently with massively large mortgages, highly leveraged. The banks were way too loose in their lending standards. So we have a lot of people with not much wriggle room now. You can't refinance because nobody will refinance you. You can't sell the property because there's not enough equity. I mean, that's a nightmare scenario, but it's not completely unrealistic.
So you think it's very clear that it's so many of the people that we see on the brink now have almost been set up to fail by the bank?
There is no doubt that they've got loans they should never have got.
Get out while you can.
Get out while you can. Absolutely. Get out while you can.
Jamison Lautet is a leading liquidator, the last port of call when owners default or banks call in their mortgages. It's a good business in bad times.
Mortgage resales have certainly increased, and I think it's reflective of the banks realising that property prices are going to deteriorate.
But you think if the banks can do the mortgages over and cover their own backside, they're happy to do so?
I think the banks are going to cover their own arse. And I think that realistically, if they foresee that they can get their money back before everyone else, then they will do so.
A reality check is coming.
I think the reality check is coming, and I think it's not too far away. The question is, how big is the cliff?
First off the cliff will be homeowners and investors with interest-only loans. 70-year-old John Norris was about to retire on the rent from a small portfolio of investment properties in Adelaide. He'd bought them with interest-only loans, which he'd been paying faithfully. Then he got a letter from his bank.
So that's it. That's the notice that no more interest only.
That's right.
The bank suddenly switched his loans to interest and principal.
Now, how much does that mean your repayments go up each month once you get that notification?
Well, that increased by 57%.
Your monthly repayments?
Monthly repayments, yes, which was pretty staggering.
Johnny's now forced to sell his properties if he can and go back to work. His retirement plan, a bitter dream.
Have the banks shown much compassion in the way they've dealt with you?
No, they haven't shown any compassion whatsoever.
Johnny's a casualty of banks calling in the interest-only loans that they so freely offered until recently.
There'd be thousands upon thousands of people across Australia in the exact same boat as John right now. Retirees who thought they were just about there and now whack. Completely different game.
Absolutely. So for no fault of their own coming up to the finish line, they've been very severely penalised, and it's having some major anxiety and stress impacts and financial impacts on people's lives at a point when they should be really enjoying them.
Perhaps the biggest pointer that a crash could be coming is the behaviour of the banks. In the course of covering this story, real estate industry insiders have told us the banks want to keep foreclosure sales secret at all costs. In fact, the order went out explicitly on foreclosure sales that we requested to film. Do not talk to 60 Minutes. Put simply, the banks don't want us to know just how bad things really are. It's just one more dirty secret from the banks.
And ask yourself the question, is my money better off somewhere else, or am I happy to hold this asset and this investment?
150 once, million 150 twice, million 150, 75, million 386. What about 390, sir? Maybe say 390. It's left-hand side.
Back in the boom, when we were getting 5 and 6 registered bidders at every auction, it was really easy to look good. It was easy to extract bids. Buyers had this fear of missing out, and they were almost jumping over the top of each other to place bids in high increments. Now that market's changed.
where would you be happy to commence the bidding today? Homes here to be bought. So you let me know the number that you're happy to start the auction at here, folks.
Top Sydney auctioneer Damien Cooley is getting used to the sound of silence.
Week one, we were telling you that you'd need to be circa $1.5 million if you'd like to be competitive here at the auction.
Even in a suburb like Stanmore, close to Sydney CBD, sellers' expectations are falling fast.
Is the news stories which are quite negative around the outlook for housing markets, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, are starting to change people's behaviour. So you're getting a broadening of the downturn. Initially, it was generally high-priced homes in Sydney and Melbourne for investors, but that downturn has now spread. We've just had this multi-decade period where lower and lower rates went into higher and higher debt and higher house prices.
Those factors aren't likely to be repeated, and that suggests to me that that multi-decade boom has probably come to an end.
Property investors are now on the front line of the downturn.
The major effect has been the borrowing capacity that we've had and the valuations that have dropped, not substantially, but have dropped a fair bit, which has made the major lenders a little bit hesitant to lend against current values.
Throughout the boom, investor David Jackson was successfully building a property portfolio. Then suddenly, an apartment he bought off the plan in central Sydney's Woolloomooloo was valued at less than he paid.
In this particular circumstance, the valuation came in less than the purchase price, which was news to me after investing in properties for 10 years.
If you said to me 20 years ago, people in 2018, young people are taking mortgages for nearly $1 million to buy a house, I would have said, well, what are you smoking?